Hello, and welcome to today's story. My name is Philip, and I like to dive deep into scary Asian stories and cover them in my videos. If you have an interesting story you want me to cover, let me know in the comments. I always read all comments. For now, let's get into today's story, where we have a few terrifying tales to share. One of them takes us straight into the heart of Bangkok, Thailand. A city known for its glittering skyline, endless night markets, and warm hospitality. But beneath the neon lights and river breeze, there are hotels that carry secrets no guest should ever uncover. This story takes place in one of those hotels, an old riverside property that locals claim was built over a cursed foundation. Travelers say it looks charming by day, but at night, the walls feel like they're breathing. The air turns heavy, and the silence feels alive. So, what happened there? Well, let's just say it's the kind of experience that makes you think twice before booking the heritage suite with the scenic river view. Because for one businessman, a single warning from the hotel staff would change his entire night and maybe even his sanity. The warning was simple: never open the window after midnight. Daniel had been to Bangkok many times before. Usually, he stayed in modern business hotels, the kind with glass elevators, polished marble floors, and the faint hum of air conditioning that never stopped. But this time, he wanted something different. Something with character. When his client recommended an old riverside hotel known for its traditional charm, he decided to try it. A touch of local culture couldn't hurt, he thought. After all, it was just for one night. The taxi dropped him off at the edge of the Chao Phraya River, where the city lights shimmered on the dark water. The hotel stood there, old but proud, a mix of fading colonial architecture and Thai wood carvings, its windows dimly glowing in the humid night. A sign above the entrance flickered faintly, half the letters burned out. As Daniel stepped inside, the air shifted. It was cooler but strangely thick, as though the place held its breath. The scent of jasmine mixed with something else, damp wood maybe, or old incense that had lingered too long. The lobby was nearly empty, except for a few antique chairs, a large grandfather clock ticking in the corner, and a ceiling fan that turned lazily above. Behind the counter, an elderly man in a pressed uniform greeted him with a polite bow. "Welcome, sir. You are here for one night, yes?" His voice was soft, but slightly hoarse, as if every word carried weight. Daniel nodded and handed over his passport. The man smiled politely, then gestured toward a young bellboy waiting by the staircase. "Room 407, the man said. "It has a river view, very quiet." But he hesitated, just for a second. His eyes flicked toward the bellboy, who looked down immediately. "Please, enjoy your stay." The bellboy led Daniel up a narrow staircase. The walls were lined with framed photos of the hotel in its early years, smiling guests in black and white, staff in traditional uniforms, the river bustling with boats. But as the staircase curved higher, the light dimmed, and the air grew heavier. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the building got older with every step. When they reached the 4th floor, the boy stopped at a door near the end of the hall. Room 407. The brass number plate was tarnished, and the wood around the frame was slightly warped. The boy slid the key into Daniel's hand and whispered almost too softly to hear, "Sir, please, don't open the window after midnight, no matter what you hear." Daniel blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Sorry, what did you say?" But the boy only bowed quickly and hurried back down the hall. His footsteps echoed until the sound disappeared completely. Inside, the room was simple but cozy. A large wooden bed, white linen, sheets, a desk facing the window, and curtains that looked heavy enough to block out the world. Outside, he could see the river, dark and restless under the moonlight. The view was beautiful, in a haunting way. Boats drifting silently, their lights like ghosts moving across the water. He unpacked his things, trying to shake off the unease. The staff were probably just superstitious, he told himself. Old hotels always had stories. It was part of their charm. Still, he couldn't ignore the faint chill that crept through the air, or how quiet everything was. No distant traffic, no laughter from the streets. Just the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the slow ticking of his watch. When Daniel finally lay down, he thought about the boy's warning again. Don't open the window after midnight. It replayed in his mind like a riddle he didn't understand. He laughed quietly to himself, rolled over, and turned off the light. The room went dark, except for the faint shimmer of the river outside. He didn't know it yet, but the night had only just begun. It started with the sound. At first, Daniel thought it was just the air conditioner, a faint mechanical hum that rose and fell in uneven rhythms, like something struggling to breathe. But when he turned his head toward the corner of the room, he realized the unit wasn't even on. The temperature had dropped on its own. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and listened. There it was again. A soft clicking followed by a dull thump from the direction of the window. Maybe it was a loose shutter, or a branch brushing against the glass. He pulled the covers aside and walked across the creaking wooden floor. The night outside was completely still. He touched the window pane. It was cold. Far colder than it should have been in the Bangkok heat. His reflection stared back at him, faintly warped by the glass, pale face, tired eyes, the faint glow of the bedside lamp behind him. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then, from somewhere beyond the window, came a sound that made his pulse skip. Tap, tap, tap. 3 clear knocks, measured, intentional. Daniel froze. His first thought was that someone might be outside. Maybe another guest. Maybe maintenance, though. Why anyone would be climbing around on the 4th floor at midnight made no sense. He waited, expecting another sound, a voice, something. But the tapping stopped. He turned away, shaking his head. He was exhausted from travel. Jet lag always played tricks on him. Still, just to be safe, he pulled the curtains closed, shutting out the view of the river and the faint moonlight that rippled across it. The fabric brushed against his hand as he turned back toward the bed. That's when he noticed something odd. The faint scent of jasmine, stronger now, fresher, as if someone had just walked through the room wearing it. He looked around, scanning every corner, the wardrobe, the bathroom door slightly ajar, the desk where he'd left his laptop. Nothing. No sign of movement. He tried to laugh it off again, but this time the sound caught in his throat. The air felt heavier, almost pressing against his skin. He switched on the TV, hoping for noise, but the screen flickered, hissed with static, and went black again. He tried the remote twice more, same result. Something about that silence didn't feel right. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet that came with late nights in unfamiliar cities. It was thick, muffled, like sound itself was being swallowed by the walls. He climbed back into bed and pulled the sheets up to his chest. It was just nerves, a strange hotel, old building, foreign place. He'd laugh about it in the morning, but when he reached for his phone to check the time, the screen lit up 12:24 a.m., and he realized there was one more sound, barely audible under his breathing. A whisper. It was so faint he thought it might be wind at first, but the windows were sealed shut. The whisper came again, stretched and trembling, just at the edge of hearing. Daniel! He froze completely. His own name, spoken softly, as if someone was standing just outside the window. The voice was female, slow, almost sorrowful. He stared at the curtains, unmoving. No wind, no shadow, just that soft call, again longer this time, closer. "Daniel, please." He felt his skin prickle. The bellboy's words flickered through his mind like a warning he should have taken seriously. "Don't open the window after midnight, no matter what you hear." He wanted to shout, to ask who was there, but his throat was too dry. Instead, he slid out of bed, his bare feet meeting the cool wooden floor. The boards creaked softly under his weight. Every step toward the window felt wrong. The room seemed darker now, the edges of the furniture blurred by the weak yellow light from the bedside lamp. The curtains swayed slightly, as though someone had brushed past them. He reached out, trembling, and touched the fabric. It was damp. His fingers came away wet, smelling faintly of river water. That's when the tapping started again, this time harder. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came directly from the glass. Then silence. Daniel's heart pounded. He didn't want to look. But curiosity, or maybe fear, forced him to. He pulled the curtains open just enough to peek through. Outside, the river shimmered in the moonlight. The boats were gone. The streets along the opposite bank were empty. But there, just beneath his window, was movement. A faint shape, barely visible in the reflection of the water. Long black hair, pale skin that caught the moonlight like porcelain. The figure seemed to be kneeling on the ledge, her head bowed. He blinked, and the shape was gone. Only ripples in the water remained. He stepped back, chest tight, trying to convince himself he'd imagined it. Sleep deprivation, he thought. Nothing more. He locked the latch on the window just to be sure, then backed away until he reached the bed again. But when he sat down, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The footprints, faint, wet marks on the wooden floor, leading from the window toward the foot of his bed. He stared at them, frozen. They were small, bare footprints, the kind left by someone who had just stepped out of water. Each one glistened faintly before fading into the wood grain, as if drying on its own. Daniel didn't move. He didn't breathe. The clock on the bedside table ticked softly, 12:33 a.m. Something was inside the room. Daniel didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He sat in the armchair near the door with the lamp switched on, eyes fixed on the window. Every sound made him flinch, the hum of the ceiling fan, the creak of the floorboards, even his own heartbeat. The wet footprints had disappeared completely by dawn, leaving no trace, as though the night itself had swallowed them. When morning came, the hotel looked different, less mysterious, more ordinary. The same hallway that had felt suffocating in the dark now seemed almost harmless. Almost. He went down to breakfast, trying to convince himself that what he'd seen had been some kind of dream, lack of sleep, hallucination, something explainable. But when he entered the small dining area, the conversations around him went quiet. The guests, mostly locals, stared at him for a moment, then returned to their meals. The air smelled faintly of coffee and incense. The same bellboy from the night before appeared beside him, pale and expressionless. "Good morning, sir," he said softly. "Did you sleep well?" Daniel managed a weak laugh. "Not really. There was some noise in my room, probably from outside." The boy didn't respond. His eyes flicked toward the window facing the river, then back to Daniel. "You stayed in room 407, yes?" Daniel nodded slowly. "That's right." The bellboy's lips parted as if he wanted to say something, but before he could, the elderly manager from the front desk appeared. His polite smile had vanished. "Sir," he said quietly, "if you don't mind, I'd like to ask, did you open the window last night?" Daniel frowned. "No. Why?" The man's gaze lingered, searching for something in his expression. Then, almost as if he didn't believe him, he said, "Please, make sure it stays closed. Always." He bowed slightly and turned away, his face pale. The way he said always made Daniel's stomach twist. He tried to eat, but every bite felt heavy. When he looked outside, the river flowed lazily in the morning Sunday. A few boats drifted past. Nothing unusual. Yet something about it unsettled him. The water looked darker than before, as though something was moving just beneath the surface. After breakfast, he went for a walk to clear his head. The hotel grounds stretched down to a small riverside path, lined with banyan trees. The air smelled of damp earth and incense. As he passed a shrine tucked into the corner of the courtyard, he noticed fresh offerings, flowers, rice, and a lit candle still flickering. An elderly woman sweeping near the path glanced at him. Her eyes were sharp and knowing. "You are staying in the old wing?" she asked, her Thai accent soft but distinct. Daniel nodded. "Yes, room 407. The broom froze mid-sweep. The woman's expression shifted from polite to alarmed. "You should not stay there. That room faces the river directly. The window—" She stopped herself, glancing around nervously. "Please, sir, just don't listen when she calls. She sounds kind, but she is not." Daniel's throat went dry. "Who?" But she turned away quickly, pretending to focus on her broom again. "Just don't open it." Her words followed him all the way back to the hotel. By the time night fell again, the tension had built into something almost unbearable. The staff avoided eye contact. The hall outside his room was darker than before. One of the ceiling lights had gone out, leaving half the corridor in shadow. Inside, the air felt thicker, heavy. The scent of jasmine had returned, faint but unmistakable. Daniel double-checked the window latch twice before sitting on the bed. He tried to distract himself with his laptop, but the Wi-Fi kept disconnecting. His phone battery was nearly dead, even though he'd barely used it all day. Then, around midnight, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied again. The room was silent, except for the river outside. He didn't want to look, but his eyes kept drifting toward the curtains. He could almost sense movement beyond them, a faint shift in the air. Then came the sound, not tapping this time, but a soft scraping, like fingernails dragging slowly across the glass. Daniel's pulse quickened. He whispered to himself, "Don't open it. Don't open it." The scraping stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a knock on his door. He nearly jumped out of his skin. He turned toward it, frozen. Another knock. 3 slow beats. He approached cautiously, every instinct screaming not to open it. "Who is it?" he called out. No answer. He waited. The knocks came again, louder this time. He pulled open the door and found the bellboy standing there, drenched in sweat, eyes wide with fear. "Sir," the boy whispered, his voice trembling. "Did you hear her?" Daniel stared at him. "What are you talking about?" The boy's gaze darted toward the window. "She comes when someone stays in that room too long. Please, you must not look at her. If you do, she will think you are the one who called her back." Before Daniel could ask anything else, the boy turned and hurried down the hall, disappearing around the corner. Daniel stood there, heart hammering, the door still open. Somewhere behind him, from inside the room, the whisper came again, soft, pleading, impossibly close. "Daniel, please." And then, faintly, the sound of the window latch shifting on, its own. Daniel's body went rigid. That single metallic click from the window latch cut through the air like a blade. He turned slowly, every muscle tight, every breath shallow. The curtains were swaying just slightly, but the air in the room was still. No fan, No breeze. Just that movement, unnatural and deliberate, as if something on the other side was breathing against the glass. He stepped closer, one hand out, as if trying to convince himself he still had control over the situation. "It's just the wind," he muttered, though even he didn't believe it. His words sounded hollow in the thick silence. Then came the whisper again, softer now, closer. "Daniel." The sound wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside, somewhere near the window. He froze mid-step, eyes darting toward the corner of the room. Nothing. Then a shadow shifted just a flicker at the edge of his vision. When he turned, the curtains were moving again, this time parting slightly, as if someone were standing behind them. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it at the window. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then the light caught something pale. A face pressed against the glass from the outside female, eyes wide and empty, lips slightly parted as if whispering his name even now. Her skin looked bloated, bluish-white, and her hair floated around her face as though she were underwater. Daniel stumbled backward, dropping his phone. The light spun wildly across the room, catching glimpses of the walls, the floor, the bed, until it landed on the wet footprints again. Only this time, there were more of them. They started at the window and trailed all the way toward the door. He bolted for the handle, but the moment he touched it, it rattled violently. Someone on the other side was trying to open it. "Sir, don't move." It was the bellboy's voice, muffled but urgent. "Don't open it. She's not gone yet." Daniel froze, torn between the horror behind him and the panic outside the door. The rattling stopped. Silence fell again. Then, in that silence, he heard the faint sound of dripping water. He looked down. Small drops were falling from above, landing one by one near his feet. He tilted his head up. There, on the ceiling directly above him, was a dark, wet patch, slowly spreading outward, and from it, something was hanging thin strands of black hair. They were swaying slightly, as if someone was floating just above the ceiling boards. A sudden chill swept through him. He stumbled backward, eyes wide. The dripping quickened. A drop hit his shoulder, cold and sticky. He looked down. His shirt was stained dark, not with water, but with something thicker. Something red. That's when the lights went out. The room plunged into darkness, save for the dim glow of the phone's flashlight on the floor. Daniel lunged for it, hands shaking. The moment he picked it up, the beam landed on the mirror, above the desk. There she was, not outside the window anymore, not above the ceiling. She was standing behind him in the reflection, tall, drenched, her hair covering half her face, her fingers long and skeletal, dripping onto the floor. He spun around. Nothing. The space behind him was empty. But in the mirror, she was still there. Closer now. His breathing turned ragged. He couldn't look away. Slowly, the figure in the mirror lifted a hand, palm facing him. And then, in perfect unison, the window behind him burst open with a deafening slam. A rush of icy air filled the room, carrying with it the thick smell of the river. Daniel stumbled backward as the curtains flew up like wings. The mirror cracked down the center with a sharp, ringing sound, slicing her reflection in half. From somewhere in the chaos came the voice again, this time clearer, louder, echoing in layers that seemed to fill the room. "Why did you open it?" Daniel dropped to the floor, covering his ears, shouting, I didn't open it!" But the wind roared through the broken latch, whipping the curtains around him. Papers scattered, the lamp toppled, and the air grew colder still. Then, all at once, everything stopped. The wind vanished. The room went still. The curtains hung limp. Daniel looked up slowly. The window was closed again, completely shut, as though it had never moved. but the floor was soaked, small puddles forming near his feet. He turned toward the mirror. The reflection showed him sitting there, trembling, but something was off. Behind his reflection, the room looked different. The wallpaper was darker, the bedsheets stained, the air hazy like a photograph that had faded with time. And in that version of the room behind his reflection, she was standing again, her head slowly tilting to one side. Her mouth moved. He couldn't hear her words, but he could read them on her lips. "You let me in." A deep knock sounded on the door again. Slow, heavy. Daniel didn't move. He couldn't. His body refused to obey. Another knock. Then another. Finally, the door creaked open just a few centimeters. The bellboy stood there, clutching a bundle of incense sticks and a small silver bowl filled with water. His face was ashen. "Sir," he said, barely above a whisper, "don't look at her reflection. Please keep your eyes down." He stepped into the room, trembling, and placed the incense on the floor. As soon as he lit them, the air shifted. The scent of jasmine vanished, replaced by sharp smoke that stung Daniel's eyes. The bellboy began to chant under his breath in Thai, the words rhythmic and desperate. The flame flickered violently, as though fighting against something unseen. Daniel turned his head slightly toward the window just for a moment, and saw her face pressed against the glass again, watching him. This time, she was smiling. And in that moment, Daniel understood. The warning wasn't just superstition. It was containment. That window was never meant to be opened. It was meant to keep her inside. The smell of the incense filled the room, thick and heavy, wrapping itself around Daniel's senses like fog. He coughed, eyes watering as the bellboy's chanting grew faster, louder, until it no longer sounded like words, but something closer to a plea. The smoke curled upward, twisting toward the ceiling where the dark patch still glistened. Then the dripping stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. The only sound left was the faint hum of the incense burning, the crackle of its tiny orange tip. Daniel's heart was hammering so loudly he could hear it echoing in his ears. The bellboy finally looked up at him, his expression pale and exhausted. "She's gone for now," he whispered, voice trembling. "But she knows you saw her. She will try again." Daniel blinked, disoriented. "Who was that? What the hell is happening?" The boy hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the window. "She was a guest. A long time ago. Before the hotel was renovated, this floor used to be part of the servants' quarters. Room 407 wasn't meant for guests." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "Then why—" The bellboy cut him off quickly. "Because the owner doesn't want people to know. Tourists love the river view. They say the old wood gives it character. But that room—" He swallowed hard. "That room is where she died." The words hung in the air like static. "She jumped," the boy continued softly. "Late one night, during the rainy season, she opened the window and threw herself into the river. They found her the next morning, or what was left of her. The water had taken her face, her hair tangled in the weeds. But some people say she didn't fall. They say she was calling for someone." Daniel shook his head, trying to piece together the fragments. "Calling for someone?" The boy nodded slowly. "A man, a foreign guest. He stayed in the same room. They said he promised her. He would come back for her. But he never did. She waited by the river every night until she couldn't anymore. So she left through the window." The room seemed to tilt slightly as Daniel processed the story. The tapping, the whispers, the way she had called his name. "She said my name," he murmured. The bellboy's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Then she's chosen you. She thinks you are him." Daniel's pulse quickened. "That's not possible." The boy shook his head. "It doesn't matter. The spirits here don't care who you are, only what you remind them of. When someone answers her call, she believes the promise has been kept. She comes through the window, searching for him, and when she realizes it's not, she tries to make them stay instead. He stood and began placing small white flowers on the windowsill, whispering prayers between each one. The river breeze pressed faintly against the glass, though the window was still firmly shut. "Why tell me this now?" Daniel asked. "You could have warned me before." The boy hesitated again, then lowered his gaze. "We do warn them. Most don't believe. Some even open it on purpose, just to see what happens." He looked at Daniel then, his expression hollow. "Those guests never check out. We find their luggage, their passports, but not them." A cold shiver crawled up Daniel's spine. He glanced toward the door, half expecting to see shadows forming beneath it. "So what happens now?" "You leave before sunset," the boy said. "I will ask the abbot from the temple across the river to bless this floor again. But she's stronger now. Every year, she finds someone new." Daniel stared at him, disbelief flickering between fear and exhaustion. "Why this window? Why always this room?" The boy pointed to the base of the frame. The old wood was cracked, the metal latch rusted, but there was something else. Faint carvings, almost invisible unless the light hit them just right. Symbols, tiny circles and lines, drawn into the grain like old protection marks. "She was meant to be sealed in," the boy said quietly. "That's why they told you not to open it. The carvings keep her spirit trapped inside the mirror between the river and this room. But when someone unlatches it, even once it breaks the seal, and she remembers." Daniel stared at the markings, feeling a hollow pit open in his chest. "So, when I looked at her—" "She looked back," the boy said, "and now she knows your face." The words hit him like a cold wave. He turned toward the mirror, its cracked surface reflecting the dim orange light of the incense. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, just for a second, he saw her again, standing behind him in the reflection, watching. He blinked, and she was gone. The bellboy let out a shaky breath. "She's not here anymore, but if you stay another night, she will come again. She always does." Daniel wanted to argue, to say he wasn't superstitious, that there had to be an explanation. But deep down, something in him already knew the truth. The chill in the air, the whispers, the smell of jasmine that still lingered faintly despite the incense smoke. They weren't random. They were memories hers. He looked toward the window one last time. The glass was fogged, and on the inside, faint streaks of moisture had appeared. At first, he thought it was condensation, but then he saw it a faint outline, drawn in the mist, a handprint, small, slender, pressed from the inside. Daniel stepped back slowly, pulse thundering in his ears. The bellboy followed his gaze, and his face went pale. Without another word, he grabbed the incense bowl, splashed the remaining water onto the frame, and began chanting again. The handprint faded, but Daniel knew it hadn't truly gone. As the last wisp of incense smoke drifted toward the ceiling, the boy turned to him and said quietly, "You can leave the hotel, sir, but she will still be looking for the one who opened her window." Daniel said nothing. He just stared out toward the river, where the morning mist was beginning to rise soft, white, and moving as though something beneath the surface was breathing. By sunrise, Daniel had packed his things in silence. He didn't bother to shower, didn't even look in the mirror. The moment he caught his reflection, he thought he saw her standing behind him again, pale, dripping, waiting. He left the room key on the desk and walked quickly down the hall, his footsteps echoing off the old wooden floor. The air felt different now, lighter, but only because he was leaving it behind. The bellboy was waiting by the stairs, clutching a bundle of fresh incense and a small white flower. "Sir," he said softly, handing him the flower, "keep this with you. Don't look back at the river. And whatever you do, don't answer if someone calls your name tonight." Daniel stared at him, unsure how to respond. He took the flower anyway, his hand trembling slightly. "Will that really help?" The boy didn't answer. He only bowed his head. Outside, the morning sun reflected off the water like shards of glass. Daniel hailed a taxi, threw his bag in, and shut the door fast. As they pulled away, he felt a strange pressure in the air, like the moment before thunder. Against his better judgment, he looked back at the hotel one last time. There, in the window of room 407, was a figure, a woman, standing perfectly still, her hair hanging long and wet against the glass. The sunlight hit the window just enough to make her face unrecognizable, but Daniel didn't need to see it to know. He turned away instantly, his chest tightening. The taxi driver glanced at him through the mirror. "You okay, sir? You look like you've seen a ghost." Daniel tried to smile, but his throat wouldn't let him. He looked down at the white flower in his hand. The petals had begun to brown at the edges, the faint scent of jasmine returning stronger now. He rolled down the window to throw it out, but stopped. From somewhere far behind, faint and almost drowned by the hum of traffic, came a voice carried by the wind. Soft, familiar, calling his name, Daniel. He froze. The flower slipped from his hand. What happened to Daniel in Bangkok wasn't an isolated case. Stories like his appear across Asia hotels built on old ground, rooms sealed for reasons no one explains, warnings that sound like superstition until it's too late. Travelers whisper about them in hushed tones, the way sailors speak about cursed waters. Because once you've stayed in a room that shouldn't exist, once you've heard a voice that shouldn't call your name, something inside you changes. And tonight's next story takes us north, to the island of Penang, Malaysia, where another traveler ignored a warning he didn't understand. A door that shouldn't have been there. A voice that begged to be heard. And a room that by morning had vanished. Aaron had been traveling for work so long that hotels barely felt like new places anymore, just boxes with different wallpaper. But this one in Penang stood out the moment he saw it. The taxi dropped him off just before sunset, the sky bleeding gold across the old colonial streets. The hotel stood at the corner of an uphill road, tall and narrow, its whitewashed walls cracked with age, its shutters painted a fading green. A carved sign above the door read, "The Colonial Pearl Hotel," though the word pearl looked newer, freshly painted over something older. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. A brass bell jingled as he stepped up to the reception desk. The young woman behind it greeted him with a polite smile, but her eyes darted quickly to the side, where a key rack hung on the wall. "Reservation for Aaron Wells," he said, sliding his passport forward. She checked the ledger, nodded, and reached for one of the brass keys. Her hand hovered briefly, then shifted one slot to the left before pulling it free. "Room 311, she said. Her tone was careful. "Second floor. End of the hall." Aaron noticed how her eyes flicked, just for a second, to the two keys beside it, 3, 12, and 3 to 10, but never the one between them. The empty hook, labeled 313, had a faint outline of dust where a key used to hang. He chuckled lightly. "What happened to 313? Lucky number, isn't it?" The receptionist's smile tightened. "We don't assign that room anymore." "Maintenance?" he teased. Her expression didn't change. "Something like that." The bellboy appeared silently beside him, taking his suitcase. He was young, maybe 18, with hair neatly combed and eyes that never quite met Aaron's. "This way, sir," he said softly, and led him up the winding staircase. The upper floor smelled faintly of damp wood and old linen. The hallway was long and dim, lined with antique lamps that flickered unevenly. The patterned carpet muffled their steps, but every so often Aaron could hear the faint creak of the old floorboards beneath. When they reached room 311, the bellboy unlocked it and set the suitcase down by the bed. The room was modest but comfortable, tall windows draped in heavy curtains, a small desk, a ceiling fan spinning lazily above. But even here, something felt uneven. The air had that strange heaviness old buildings sometimes carry, as if it was holding its breath. The boy turned to leave, but Aaron, half joking, asked, "Hey, tell me something. What's the deal with room 313? The bellboy froze. For a heartbeat, the hallway light flickered again. Then, without turning, the boy said, "No one stays there." He bowed quickly and left. Aaron stood in the doorway for a few seconds, frowning. He stepped into the hall, glanced down toward the far end where the numbers continued 309, 310, 311, 312, then stopped. Where 313 should have been, there was only a blank section of wall, same wallpaper, same trim, but no door. Just smooth plaster. He laughed under his breath. Old superstition, he thought. Some hotels skipped the number 13. Others just sealed it up. He closed his door, trying not to think about how the plaster had looked slightly newer than the rest. Later that evening, he ordered dinner, showered, and watched TV until the sound of the rain began to fill the silence outside. The monsoon had come in fast, hammering against the windows, turning the city into a blur of reflections. Aaron liked nights like this, when the storm was loud enough to drown out the world. But when he turned off the light and lay in bed, the sound changed. Between the thunderclaps, he could hear something else echoing faintly down the hall. A sound too soft to be footsteps, too uneven to be the wind. He turned his head toward the door, listened carefully. It sounded like someone crying. The crying came in waves, soft at first, almost swallowed by the rain. Then clearer a woman's voice, thin and trembling, drifting down the hallway like a sigh carried on the wind. Aaron sat up slowly, unsure if he was dreaming. The bedside clock read 12:47 a.m. The TV was off, the room silent except for the storm outside. Yet the sound persisted, gentle sobs, broken every few seconds by the faintest whisper. He listened harder. It was definitely coming from the hallway. He rubbed his eyes and groaned quietly. "Someone probably left their window open," he muttered, pulling on a t-shirt. But curiosity has a strange pull, that itch in the back of the mind that insists just check. He got up, slipped into his slippers, and unlocked the door. The hallway outside was empty. The lamps cast long, uneven shadows across the carpet. The air felt cooler than it should have been. The crying stopped the moment he stepped out, replaced by the sound of rain battering the roof. Then, just as he started to close the door again, it came back, louder now. "Please, help me." It came from somewhere to his left, down the hall. Room 313 sighed. Aaron's eyes followed the numbers as he walked. 309, 310, 311, 312, and then he stopped. The plastered wall was still there, smooth and pale beneath the flickering light. No door, no frame, just flat wall where a room should be. but the voice came from behind it, muffled, desperate. He frowned, pressing his ear against the wall. "Hello?" The sobbing paused. Then, very softly, the voice whispered back, "Please, don't leave me here." Aaron's stomach tightened. It sounded real. Too real. He stepped back, hesitating. Maybe there was a hidden service corridor, or an adjoining wall to another room. He tapped the plaster with his knuckles. Solid. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You're losing it, man." But as he turned to leave, the voice came again, this time from right beside him. "Aaron!" He froze. He hadn't told anyone his name. His mouth went dry. "Who is this?" No answer. Just the soft, steady sound of weeping. Then a faint rattle, like a doorknob being turned. But there was no door. He stumbled backward, eyes fixed on the wall. The rattle grew louder, more frantic, as though someone on the other side was trying to force their way out. "Please!" the voice cried, now sharp with panic. "Let me out. It's dark." Aaron's heart raced. He reached out instinctively and ran his hand over the surface again, and this time he felt it, the faint outline of a frame, the invisible edge of where a door had once been. A chill crawled down his spine. He took another step back. The sobbing turned to pounding. Thud, thud, thud. The wall shook slightly beneath each hit, dust drifting from the ceiling. He turned and ran back to his room, slamming the door shut and locking it. The sound stopped immediately. Silence. For a long minute, he just stood there, chest heaving, staring at the handle. Then his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello?" Static crackled through the speaker. Then, beneath it, breathing. Slow, uneven. "Aaron!" He hung up instantly, hands shaking. He called the front desk instead. A click, then the faint hum of the line. "Yes, sir?" "This is Aaron Wells in 311, he said quickly. "There's someone crying in the hall, near 313. You need to send someone up." The line went silent. "Hello?" he said. "Did you hear me?" No answer, just faint, static. Then a soft voice, different from the receptionist's, came through a man's voice, older. "Sir," it said quietly, "please stay in your room. Do not go near that wall again." The call ended. Aaron stood frozen, the phone pressed to his ear, the dial tone droning in his skull. He stared at the wall for a long time, trying to convince himself this was a prank, a bad dream, anything that made sense. But when he turned off the lamp and lay back down, his mind wouldn't stop replaying it, that voice, the sobbing, the way it had whispered his name. He eventually drifted into a restless half-sleep, but it didn't last. At exactly 3:13 a.m., he woke up to a soft knock on his door, 3 times, slow, careful. He held his breath, staring at the handle. Another knock, quieter this time. Then the voice, right outside. "Please, let me in." Every instinct screamed, not to move, not to answer. But curiosity, that same force that had led him into the hallway, clawed at him again. He stood, took a slow step toward the door. The floor creaked under his weight. The knocking stopped. He reached for the peephole, but before he could look through it, the faint sound of sobbing returned. Only now, it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from behind him, from the corner of the room. He spun around. The lights flickered once. The air felt heavy again, colder, wetter. And then, for just a second, he saw something impossible. The faint outline of a door forming on his wall, right where 313 should have been. Aaron's breath came in short, sharp bursts, as he stared at the faint outline of the door taking shape on his wall. The edges shimmered like heat ripples, flickering in and out as if the building itself couldn't decide whether the door existed. The sobbing behind it grew louder, closer. He stumbled backward until his legs hit the bed frame. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the outline faded. The wall returned to smooth plaster, pale and unbroken. He stood frozen for a moment, before lunging for the light switch. The bulb above him buzzed faintly, then steadied, casting the room in its weak yellow glow. Nothing moved. The air was still again, though the temperature had dropped noticeably. Aaron didn't sleep after that. He sat awake on the edge of the bed until dawn, watching the wall, half expecting the shape to return. It didn't. But the longer he sat there, the stronger one thought became he needed to know what was behind that wall. When morning came, he went straight downstairs. The lobby was quiet except for the slow sweep of a ceiling fan and the faint clinking of cups from the dining room. The receptionist from the night before looked up when she saw him, her polite smile faltering. "Good morning, Mr. Wells," she said too quickly. He leaned on the counter. "I need to ask you something about the second floor." Her eyes flicked toward the ledger. "Of course. Is there a problem with your room?" "Yes," he said. "I heard something last night. Someone crying near room 313. Her face drained of color. "Sir, there is no room 313. "I know," he said, lowering his voice. "That's the problem." For a moment she didn't speak. Then she looked past him toward the entrance, where an older man in a white shirt and vest was polishing the brass bell. He must have been the manager. She murmured something in Malay, and the man's expression darkened. He approached slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Sir," he said, his voice low, "you shouldn't have gone down that hallway after midnight." Aaron frowned. "So you do know something?" The man's jaw tightened. "We tell our guests to stay in their rooms for a reason. That wing of the building hasn't been the same since we sealed that room." "Why seal it at all?" Aaron pressed. "Who was in there?" The man looked over his shoulder, as if to make sure no one else was listening. "It was many years ago. A woman, a local singer, who performed here when the hotel still had a lounge. She stayed in room 313. One night, she was found hanging from the ceiling fan. People said she'd been waiting for someone who never came." The words sank into Aaron's mind like stones sinking in deep water. "And now?" The man's voice grew even quieter. "Now, guests hear her crying. Sometimes she calls for help. Sometimes she calls by name." He paused, his gaze steady. "You said she called you, didn't she?" Aaron didn't answer. He didn't need to. The manager sighed heavily. "You must change rooms. I'll move you to the ground floor." Aaron hesitated, curiosity warring with unease. "Why not just fix the wall? Tear it down. Rebuild it properly." The man looked up at him sharply. "Because we tried." The words hung there, heavy and final. "She comes back," he said. "Every time." Aaron didn't ask more. He went back upstairs to pack, but when he opened his door, something felt wrong again. The curtains were drawn, he didn't remember closing them. The air smelled faintly of perfume, sweet but faintly sour beneath it, like flowers left too long in a vase. He reached for the curtains, hesitated, then pulled them open. Outside, the street below was bustling with daylight. Normal, except for one thing in the reflection of the window glass. He saw something behind him. A shape, faint and gray, standing exactly where the wall to room 313 would be. He spun around. Nothing. Heart pounding, he grabbed his suitcase, zipped it shut, and reached for the doorknob. But just before he could turn it, someone knocked from the other side. 3 gentle knocks. He froze, listening. Then, through the door, a woman's voice whispered, almost tenderly, "Please, don't leave me here again." His hand slipped from the handle. "Who are you?" he whispered. No reply, only soft crying. He stepped back, pulse racing. The crying faded, replaced by a faint humming sound, a melody, haunting and slow. It took him a second to recognize it, an old love song, one he'd heard the night before while having dinner in the hotel restaurant, the same song that had played faintly over the speakers, and then it hit him. The same voice, the same tone. He turned slowly toward the radio on the nightstand. It was off unplugged, but the humming continued, drifting from nowhere, filling the entire room. Aaron stumbled backward until his back hit the wall, the very one that hid 313. The humming stopped, and from the other side, a single whisper slid through the plaster like breath through fog. "Aaron, I remember you." Aaron froze where he stood, back pressed to the cold plaster wall. The voice was right there, behind the surface, clear, intimate, and impossible. It didn't sound like an echo or a trick of acoustics. It sounded like someone breathing into his ear. "I remember you," the whisper came again, faint but deliberate, as though the wall itself had lungs. He stepped away slowly, his mind racing. Every nerve in his body screamed to leave, to grab his bag and run down the stairs, but something stronger kept him there. Curiosity, yes, but also something else. The voice didn't sound angry. It sounded lonely. The air in the room grew thick. His skin prickled with cold, and when he glanced at the mirror above the desk, the glass was fogging over as if someone were exhaling against it. Then, faintly, letters began to appear through the mist. HELP. Aaron's pulse hammered in his chest. "What do you want?" he whispered. The answer came in the form of a single, muffled sob behind the wall, followed by 3 soft knocks. Not random ones measured, rhythmic. The same pattern from the night before. He couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing his phone, he turned on the flashlight and walked slowly toward the wall. The plaster seemed to ripple under the beam, the faint outline of a door beginning to shimmer once again. The knob's shape pushed out slightly, like something underneath was trying to break through. He reached out a trembling hand, not to open it, just to touch it, to feel if it was real. The moment his fingers brushed the wall, the temperature dropped so suddenly, his breath turned white. His phone flickered and died. The light vanished. And then, silence. Except it wasn't true silence. Beneath it, he could hear whispering. Dozens of voices, layered and distant, like an old recording played backward. He couldn't make out the words, but one voice rose above the rest hers. "You left me here." Aaron stumbled backward, heart racing. "I don't know you," he shouted, but even as he said it, a strange feeling of recognition washed over him. Something buried deep, like a forgotten dream. A hotel hallway, a woman's laughter, the faint scent of jasmine and cigarette smoke. He blinked hard, shaking it off, but the image lingered. The wall pulsed faintly. The outline of the door sharpened until it looked solid again, the knob glinting faintly under the flickering light. A single click echoed through the room, the latch unlocking itself. "No," Aaron whispered, backing away. "No, no, no!" The door handle began to turn. He bolted for the main door, yanking it open only to stop dead. The hallway was gone. In its place stretched a corridor he didn't recognize. The walls were darker, the carpet soaked as though it had been through a flood. The lamps buzzed faintly, casting a dull amber glow over peeling wallpaper. A faint hum of old jazz music drifted through the air, distant but clear, like an old record looping endlessly. His body screamed to run, but his feet moved forward instead. Down the hallway, toward the sound. Halfway down, he noticed something strange on the floor, a set of wet footprints leading ahead of him. Small, bare. Each step leaving a faint reddish stain on the carpet. He followed them, his pulse hammering in his ears. The prints stopped in front of a half-open door at the end of the hall. Room 313. It was there again, whole, real. The brass numbers glinted faintly in the dim light. He reached for the doorframe, hesitating. The sobbing returned, louder now, coming from inside the room. "Please, help me." He pushed the door open. Inside was a small, dimly lit room. The wallpaper was the same faded pattern as his own, but stained dark with age. A bed sat in the corner, sheets tangled, ceiling fan hanging motionless above, the smell of mold and perfume mixed in the air. And on the far side of the room, by the window, stood a woman. Her back was turned, her long black hair matted and wet, her white dress clinging to her frame. The sound of her sobbing filled the space, low and guttural. "Ma'am?" Erin's voice cracked. "Are you all right?" The sobbing stopped instantly. Her head turned slightly, not enough to show her face, but just enough to let him see the side of her cheek, pale and glistening like porcelain left in the rain. Her hand twitched. Then she spoke, voice trembling with something between love and rage. "You said you'd come back." Erin stumbled backward. "I don't know you." But she turned fully now, and the words died in his throat. Her face was wrong. Too pale, the eyes too dark, like hollows filled with water. Her lips were blue, stretched into a faint, brittle smile. "Don't leave again," she whispered. And before he could react, the door behind him slammed shut. The room seemed to shrink, the air thickening into fog. The ceiling fan began to spin on its own, slowly at first, then faster creaking, screeching until it whirred like a turbine. The curtains billowed, though the window was closed. Erin backed toward the door, pulling at the handle, but it wouldn't move. The knob burned cold in his hand. Behind him, the woman began to hum that same love song, the one from the radio. Her voice echoed through the room, growing louder, sharper, until it was a wail that rattled the glass. Erin dropped to his knees, hands over his ears. "Stop!" he shouted. "What do you want from me?" The humming stopped. When he looked up, she was inches from his face. Her eyes were black and endless. "I just want someone," she whispered, "to let me out." The lights blew out with a violent pop. The room plunged into darkness, and the last thing Erin felt was a cold, wet hand gripping his wrist. Erin woke to the sound of voices, distant, muffled, urgent. His body ached, his head pounded, and for a long, disoriented moment, he couldn't remember where he was. The air smelled like smoke and wet plaster. He blinked slowly and realized he was lying on the hallway floor, right outside his room. The light above him flickered. The carpet was damp, stained dark. His clothes clung to his skin as though he'd been pulled from water. When he tried to move, pain shot through his arm. His wrist was bruised where something cold and strong had gripped him. The manager and 2 security guards stood nearby, speaking in low tones. When they noticed he was awake, the manager crouched beside him. His expression wasn't angry. It was weary, almost mournful. "You're lucky," he said softly. "Most people who hear her never come back out." Erin's throat was dry. What happened?" The manager exchanged a look with one of the guards before answering. "You opened the door, didn't you?" Erin hesitated. The memories came in, flashes, the crying, the humming, her face inches from his, that impossible coldness sinking into his skin. "It was already open," he whispered. "I didn't open it." The man sighed heavily, as if that answer made no difference. "She calls for someone every few months. Always a man, always alone. We tell guests not to go near that end of the hall, but curiosity." He shook his head. "It's stronger than fear." Aaron tried to sit up. His vision blurred. "Who is she?" The manager's expression darkened. "She was a singer, used to perform here when this hotel was still a colonial club. Her name was Mei Lin. She lived in room 313 for nearly a year. Everyone loved her voice, her grace. But one night, she disappeared. The next morning, the room was locked from the inside, and they found her hanging from the ceiling fan." Aaron stared at him. "Suicide?" "That's what they wrote in the report," the manager said. "But the staff back then told a different story. They said she wasn't alone that night. She had a guest, a man who stayed in room 311. Aaron's chest tightened. "His room," the manager continued quietly. "No one remembers his name. He was a foreigner, like you. They said he left early that morning before the body was found. People whispered that she'd begged him not to go, that he promised to come back, but he never did." Aaron swallowed hard. His head spun, images colliding in his mind, the woman's voice calling him by name, her words. "You said you'd come back," he muttered. "She thinks I'm him." The manager nodded. "She doesn't know time has passed. Every time someone answers her call, she believes he's returned, that she's been found, and when she realizes it's not him, he trailed off. She can't bear it." Aaron glanced at the wall across from him. Room 313's space was still sealed, the plaster cracked from the inside, as though something had pressed against it. He could still feel the cold on his skin, the way her hand had wrapped around his wrist. "I saw her," he whispered. "I touched her." The manager's eyes widened slightly. "Then you need to leave. Tonight," Aaron frowned. "What do you mean, She'll follow," the man interrupted. "Not the way you think. She remembers faces, voices. If she believes you're the one she waited for, she'll try to find you again. Some guests say they hear her, even after they've gone home, in hotel mirrors, in reflections, in their dreams." One of the guards crossed himself quietly. The other wouldn't meet Aaron's eyes. The manager stood and helped him to his feet. "We've sealed that door many times," he said, "with plaster, with bricks, even with prayers from the temple. But it always comes back. Some nights, if you walk that hallway, you can still hear her humming." Aaron rubbed his temples, trying to process it all. "Why keep the hotel open?" The manager looked away. "It's old. It's history. And people don't believe in ghosts until they see one." He hesitated, then added, "Besides, she only calls for those who will listen." They led him back downstairs. As they passed the reception desk, the young woman there avoided his gaze completely. Her hands trembled as she slid the checkout form toward him. He signed without a word. His handwriting was barely legible. Outside, the afternoon rain had turned the streets slick and shining. He stood beneath the awning, the city sounds distant and muffled, the air heavy with humidity. For the first time, he realized he could still smell her perfume, faint, floral, but unmistakable. He looked down at his wrist again. The bruise had darkened, shaped almost like the outline of slender fingers. The manager joined him at the door. "You should go straight to the airport," he said. "Don't look back. Don't answer if you hear your name." Aaron nodded numbly, stepping into the rain. The city blurred in the haze, taxis honking in the distance. He told himself it was over, that he'd leave Penang and never think about this again. But as he turned the corner, a shop window caught his reflection. For just a moment, another face appeared beside his pale, water-streaked, smiling faintly. When he blinked, it was gone. And from somewhere far down the street, carried faintly on the rain, came a woman's voice singing that same slow, haunting love song. Aaron's flight left just after sunset. He sat by the window, staring blankly at the clouds glowing red beneath the fading light. His wrist still throbbed under the cuff of his sleeve, the bruise colder now than it should have been. He kept checking his reflection in the glass, half expecting to see her face again, pale and silent beside his own. When the plane began its descent, the city lights below blurred into rivers of gold. He told himself he was fine, that it was over, that ghosts only existed where you believed in them. But when he powered his phone back on, a new voicemail notification appeared from an unknown number. He hesitated, then pressed play. Static filled the speakers. Beneath it, faint and trembling, came a woman's voice. "Please, don't leave me again." He dropped the phone, heart pounding. The screen went black for a moment, then flickered back to life. A text appeared, unsent but saved in drafts, as if someone else had typed it. "I remember you." The plane landed with a jolt, wheels screeching against the runway. The cabin lights flickered on. Around him, passengers began to unbuckle their seatbelts, stretching, laughing, oblivious. Aaron sat frozen, staring at the message. The faint scent of jasmine drifted through the recycled air, impossible and familiar. When he finally looked back at the window, the reflection wasn't his. It was hers, pale, smiling, water trailing down her cheeks like tears. The cabin lights dimmed for a moment as the engines powered down, plunging everything into shadow. And just before the reflection vanished, her lips moved one last time. "You said you'd come back." Aaron blinked, and the window was empty again. The flight attendant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Welcome home." But as he stood, the seat beside him was still damp.